Hi, class. Happy Monday. Well, if you're watching this on a Monday, but we are almost to the end of this course. I'm so proud of you guys. You're doing such a good job. I'm almost finished watching all of your videos. And I can tell just by the feedback that I've given you, and then with your second attempts, you really are getting the hang of how to create a very safe therapeutic relationship. And so those skills do not ever leave. You will be using those interventions no matter what theory you choose or practice. It's the unconditional positive regard, the empathy, the genuineness that is going to be foundational in your clinical work. And today we are going to, or this week, we're actually going to apply some more advanced techniques, and that's cognitive behavioral therapy. CBT is probably the most well-known, the most well-used, and the theory that has probably the most evidence to back up the effectiveness of it. And I do want, though, to point out and make sure I really emphasize that when you are providing a more advanced skill, like providing psychoeducation or helping a client to identify a cognitive distortion or challenging a thought, that we still do it only when the rapport is built. If you provide a advanced intervention too soon before the rapport is built, the intervention is not going to work. You also want to make sure that the client knows you understand them and you validate their feelings before you challenge a thought. Because if you challenge a client's distortions or thinking, or do like a downward arrow technique too soon, the client is going to feel dismissed, not understood. And so just something to think about. But for the purpose of this exercise, I do want to see you practicing some more of these advanced skills. The other thing I want to point out is providing psychoeducation and helping the client identify a distortion does still not mean you tell the client what to do. So there is no advice giving in therapy. Psychoeducation and advice giving is very different. And we'll go in that a little bit as I go through the material today. And so you still want to keep your opinions to yourself. You want the session to really be about the client. In CBT, also, there is some self-disclosure, but you want to make sure if you are to self-disclose, you only self-disclose when it's going to benefit the client. And I would say only like 60 seconds. You do not want to make the session about you as a therapist. It's always about the client. And so let's go ahead and just dive in to CBT. All right, here we go. Hope you all have watched Gay Heart's videos, because that will lay a very strong foundation to this little mini lecture, because I'm not going to go into it into detail, because you should have watched Gay Heart. So the main premises of CBT is understanding the correlation between your thoughts, your emotions, feelings, and then your behavior. And so we're all tied together. And kind of similar to person-centered, you do want to help the client to raise awareness, but the awareness is more specifically to the mind, the thoughts, the feelings, and the behavior connection. And so that's why it's called the ABC theory. And CBT is more concerned about the thoughts than the actual situation. So it's not so much the situation that they're going through, but the meaning that a client creates from the situation, the thoughts that a client is telling themselves about themselves, others, the world, even God. That's what a CBT therapist is very focused on. So in your role play this week, you are going to be asking clients about their thoughts in addition to their feelings. With a person-centered, raising awareness, we're more concerned about the here and the now. What's their body telling them? What are their thoughts telling? Their feelings telling them, their emotions. CBT, we are concerned about that in addition to the meaning a client is making in their thoughts. So let's go to some of the interventions. So what you'll be doing in your role play this week is asking for their client's thoughts. So you say, so I'm wondering what you're telling yourself in this situation. I'm wondering what you were thinking. Now, mind you, tapping into a client's subconscious thoughts is very hard. This doesn't come easy or natural. It's a struggle for us to identify the subconscious. So sometimes clients might just need time. They might need to sit and think and pause, and that's perfectly acceptable. And so you're going to be looking at their mood. Let's see. Oh, here, something to point out to make note of is that empathy and person-centered was the key intervention. For CBT, empathy is still used as a way to cultivate safety in order to provide some of these more advanced skills, such as challenging their distortions or even providing a thought record. So empathy is still key. So here we are. One thing to look at is, so you still want the collaboration, the clients to feel safe. So you're caring, you're understanding. And then the goal is to alleviate distress, but here, elicit feedback. So this is really important that you guys do in this role play. At the end of the session, ask the client, how was today for you? How was the session? If there was any ruptures, you want to acknowledge it, because the therapeutic alliance is only there if the client believes it's there. Progress in counseling is only there if the client believes it's there. If therapy is effective, it's only true if the client believes it's true. Research shows that the more experience a therapists get, they tend to decrease in their effectiveness. Why? Because they tend to go rogue and think they know the client. They think they have the client figured out and start to tell the client what to do. Providing feedback, what we do at my agency at Emmaus is we do something called a session outcome rating scale, and then we administer this at the end of every session. And it's not a way for us to critique our clinical skills. The session outcome rating or feedback loop is an assessment of what the client is wanting and needing out of session. And if you pivot and if you tailor sessions to what the client needs and wants, you're going to have good prognosis and good outcomes. So what I want you to do for the role play at the end is you ask the client, how was today for you? Now, clients, I want you to be brutally honest. I want you to give your therapist actual feedback. We are still going to be writing the feedback in the observation sheet, the observer, but this is a chance for the client to actually verbally tell the therapist. Now, I'm very aware of what I'm asking, because who likes to receive feedback, especially when it's negative? Because we are here to grow and we are here to learn and to be a better therapist. I want you to practice the skill of receiving feedback. And if we can look at it as, this is not a critique of my clinical skills. This is what my client is telling me that they need. So clients, if you feel like your therapist talk too much, say, oh, I kind of feel like you talk too much. Or if you say, I would have liked more empathy. I would have liked more validation. I would have liked more psychoeducation. Clients, tell your therapist this in the role play. Therapist, ask your client for feedback at the end of the role play. I want you to think for a second, if we can just I'm going to zoom out. If you've ever had a therapy session, or have you interacted with somebody when there was a power differential, when they're in a position of power and authority, and you are on the opposite end? And how that feels when somebody in authority or power says something that kind of rubs you the wrong way or kind of hurts, or you feel misunderstood. And what does that feel like? If you've had a therapy session before, how many of you have had experience where your therapist have done something or said something that you're like, ugh, I did not feel good at all? And did you say something to them? Probably not. Why? Because of the power differential. The more vulnerable a client gets with us, the more power and influence we have in the therapeutic relationship. So can you imagine what that would have felt like for you to be able to give your honest, heartfelt feedback to a position of power and authority, and for them to respond with empathy, and for them to say, wow, thank you for telling me that. Thank you for sharing me how you felt. And they attuned and they validated that and they welcomed that. They didn't get defensive. They didn't justify it. They welcomed that. That's healing. I just think about it, get goosebumps. That is the power of the therapeutic relationship. And so for this role play, invite the client to give you feedback, practice grounding yourself, taking deep breaths, receiving it, and attuning to that feedback. Well, thank you for giving me the feedback that I talk too much. I hear that you really wanted to talk more about your problems. I hear that you wanted more empathy from me. Thank you for sharing that with me. Guys, that is a powerful tool. Powerful tool. So you're going to do that in this week's role play. Okay. Other thing you're going to be doing in this week's role play is here are some questions. So on page 210, here are some questions that you're going to ask your client. And we want to understand, like, as I said earlier, we're not concerned about the event, but what was leading up before the event, the triggers, the emotions, and the thoughts. And so this is what you're going to do this week in your role play. Awesome. What were you doing before, during, after the episode, the event? Where were you? What was around, what was around you, the time of day? We're doing, it's called basically a chain analysis. And we're trying to take a step back, understand the bigger picture. Here's an example of how this will play out in real life. You have a client come to you and tell you that they walked into a group of girls and they immediately stopped talking. And then your client was saying that she got all flustered and overwhelmed because the group of girls stopped talking to her. And then she ran out of the room because she was so embarrassed. So we want to really analyze the situation. And so what we're trying to determine is, let's slow the process way down, because a lot of what we do when we think and we act is so fast and automatic. We're going to slow them down. So how this will look is, what were you doing right before you came into the room with the girls? Well, I was on the phone with my mom and we got into a huge argument because I wasn't coming home for Christmas. And so she was yelling at me. So what were you feeling? Well, I was feeling frustrated. What were some of your thoughts? Well, I was feeling just, gosh, my mom just doesn't get me. She doesn't understand. And you validate and say, yeah, I can see how that can be frustrating, that your mom doesn't understand that you don't want to go home for Christmas or Thanksgiving. So then what happened? Well, I was looking for my friends to go talk to them to tell them how I was feeling. But when I walked in, the group of girls, they all stopped talking, stared at me. And so obviously they were talking about me or didn't want me around. That's a distortion. Do you pick on that? That's my cognitive distortion that I made up. And that's what we want to challenge, but in a very gentle way. So you say, okay, so you had a thought that they were talking about you right before you got there, or that they didn't want you there. And the client said, yes. This is where we challenge this very gently. We say, let's talk about that. Let's talk about this thought of not being wanted, or they're talking about you. Where do you think that belief came from? Do you see, very slowly uncovering that? Where did that belief come from? We want the client to challenge their own distortions themselves. We don't want to tell them that's the distortion. Don't think that way, because then the client's going to be like, oh, what's wrong with my head? Why do I feel this way? We want the client to be the ones that come up with their own like aha moment. Let's talk about this belief of not feeling good enough or not wanted. What do you think led up to this belief for you? Where do you think this belief came from? Do you think that that was an accurate thought? Is there another a potential another reason why another reason why the girls stopped talking to you? No, I just gave you like 5 interventions in one sentence. Just pick one. Try to really slow it down, ask one question, and let the client think and mull it over. So let's go ahead and describe your inner thoughts, conversations, thoughts by thoughts. Then what did you think? Then what did you feel? And then going on. So what was going on in your life at the time, during, and after? Okay. Were there normal activities and stressors? So the other thing that we do is called a downward arrow. And a downward arrow is when we kind of help the client think of the worst case scenario so that they understand that they are very, they do have this exaggeration and this negative thoughts. So what you can say, let's say you have a client that tells you that they don't want to go and ask their friend out for coffee. And you say, tell me, what do you think is going to happen? Well, they're going to reject me. And very gently you say, okay, they're going to reject you. Then what would happen if they rejected you? And we're getting the clients to stop and to think and go deeper. We don't want to say, that's not true. They're not going to reject you. Or even if they do, that's their issue. We're not doing that. We want the client to come up with the answer. Okay, so you think that they're going to reject you. What would happen if they reject you? The client's going to say, well, then I'm going to feel pretty icky. Okay, so what would happen if you're pretty icky? Well, I guess I'll just feel depressed. Okay, what would happen if you feel depressed? Well, if I feel depressed, then no one will really like me, and I'll be lonely forever. Okay, what would happen if you be lonely? So we're kind of getting them to go down, down, down. And what we're essentially doing is helping them to see that their thoughts are irrational. By taking it down to the worst case scenario, we're getting either to a core belief, or we're getting them to see the worst case scenario is actually not true, something that they made up. Okay, now we want to look at, we're going to bring Helen in for a second. And so this is where we're going to analyze Helen through a CBT lens. So we want to see if we're picking up on any automatic thoughts. Are there thoughts that Helen is telling herself about the situation? Now, this is one of the questions that the quiz got wrong, that a lot of you actually picked the right thing. So good job picking the right thing, and such a good job knowing that you picked the right answer and challenging it. I was actually very impressed with you guys. Okay, so automatic thoughts are shoulds, oughts. Here's an example. If my friend does not return my calls in 24 hours, she really doesn't like me. That's an automatic thought. So now we're going to see, does Helen have any automatic thoughts? And if it's not clear, let's just hypothesize and say, the therapist can inquire if Helen thinks that her parents are going to not love her anymore. And so the therapist is going to ask about those automatic thoughts. Okay, some intermediate beliefs. These are absolute rules, and they shape the automatic thoughts, such as good friends always return calls quickly. So immediate belief is good friends should return calls quickly. And then if the friend doesn't return her call quickly, then the automatic thought is, well, then this person is not a good friend and she doesn't really care about me. So we're going to see if Helen has any intermediate beliefs. The next one is core beliefs. This is what we think about ourselves, such as I am not good enough. I am not lovable. I am worthless. And so if we have a feeling about ourselves as I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable, and you have a belief that good friends should call within 24 hours, and if a situation happens when a friend doesn't call within 24 hours, the automatic thought ties into the core belief. See, it's because I'm not good enough. It's just perpetuating this core belief. So do we see any core beliefs with Helen? Are you seeing any beliefs she has about herself? I am dumb. I am not smart. A core belief is I am not ever going to complete this course because I am not capable of master's level work. That's a core belief. So core belief is I am not smart enough. I'm not capable of this type of work in this program. The immediate belief is this course is too hard. The automatic thoughts or this course is hard, but the intermediate belief is this course should be easy for me, and because it's not easy, I am dumb. Automatic thought is I'm just going to fail this class. Is that it's just this class is impossible. Okay, so we want to go back to Helen and just identify some of these CBT concepts. Let's go to schemas. The schemas are the deepest level of cognitive structure. They are the frameworks of the mind. The schema, think about it like as a whole. And this schema, your cognitive schema, is the framework to which you interpret the world through. It is shaped by your feelings, your thoughts, your behaviors, situations. It was developed in your early childhood, and you've developed meaning. You've created meanings from events. And so example is if you had a situation, let's say with your growing up in your household, and you were able to identify your feelings and your thoughts. Your dad was like, your mom was like, shove it down, suck it up, son, man up. You develop this in your schema that my thoughts and my feelings are not valid. And because of that, is that I am not worth, my thoughts are not worth saying. Nobody cares about what I believe, what I think, and see how all that kind of ties in together. And so here is an example, is that I am utterly worthless. Even if I call my best friend, won't take the time to call me, no one really cares about me. What's the point of even trying to have friends if they only call when it's convenient for them? Once triggered, this information tends to be filtered to support the premise of the schema. So the schema is really at the core of your mind and what you think. So for Helen, what are we picking up as far as themes regarding her schematic thinking, her schema? In your role play this week, I want you to try and identify your client's schemas, negative thoughts, and core beliefs. Now, what do you do with that once you have it? That's a very common question I get, is just at this point, we're just trying to raise awareness and gently challenge that. And how we gently challenge that, we're going to say, let's talk about where this thought came from. Do you think this thought is really accurate? And that's it. That's really all we're going to do, is gently try to challenge it and then create awareness to the thoughts. Here is some more. I'm pretty sure that Gayhart went through these in the textbook, in her lecture. So I'm not going to go through them in detail, but if you have more questions about some of these, let me know. But here is more examples of distortions. And so as you read Gayhart's lecture, and then as you read the textbook, try to see if Helen fits into any of these distortions, if you're picking up on them, or if your client's picking up on them. For example, the arbitrary interference is based on little evidence. So assuming your partner is cheating on you because she doesn't answer her phone immediately. So here's an example. So pick up on those on Helen. And then here we have dysfunctional schemas. So I am helpless. So in your case conceptualization, you make sure you identify the concept. So some of you are still struggling with this a little bit. Some of you are doing a very good job, but you want to make sure that you identify the concept and then you be very specific in how it relates to Helen. So if you're seeing that Helen has a very dependent, where did it go? Has a very dependent negative, okay, down here. Distortion. If Helen has a dependent distortion, you're going to say, Beck identifies dysfunctional schemas as it breaks it down to one of them being a dependent distortion. And then you cite Gayhart. For example, Helen believes that she is helpless and she cannot get through school. Another one is avoidant. It appears that Helen is experiencing an avoidant cognitive distortion. And then you specifically say, how is Helen applying or manifesting this distortion? So I want to see you integrate Helen very specifically to the concept. And most of you guys, like I said, are doing such a good job, which is why if I didn't give you a lot of feedback on this last case conceptualization form, it's because you're doing phenomenal at it. Okay, going back to this textbook, so irrational beliefs. Are you seeing any irrational beliefs for Helen? Is she taking on any shoulds and she's oughts? Now I want to pause here for a second, see how we're seeing some similarities between the humanistic theory. So there is some overlap. So in humanistic, we did see that one of their causes for pathology is shoulds. And so here we see also that CBT takes on the same premise, that somebody shoulding on you causes some distress. Okay. Here's some more perfection-based worth, going down. All right. So I hope this brings some clarity to the goals for this week. I'm just going to recap one more time. So for this week, we're doing the role play for CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. Same premise, therapist, client, and observer. And you're going to still do your empathy, unconditional positive regard, attuning, but then you're going to start applying a more advanced skill of asking for identifying thoughts, going back to the chain analysis that we discussed earlier, trying to figure out what was happening right beforehand, asking the clients their thoughts, what were you thinking, and then gently challenging them. Is going to say, for example, it's like, let's talk about this thought, I am worthless, or no one's going to like me. Let's talk about this a little bit more and unpack it. Where do you think this thought came from? How do we know this thought to be true? Is there any other possible rationale or reason for this? Now, mind you, like I said before, I just asked 3, just pick one. So try some of that in this role play, and don't give advice. Don't tell the client what to do. If you do provide psychoeducation really should be only given if you are an expert in what you're providing psychoeducation in. For example, psychoeducation isn't telling the client what to do. Psychoeducation is talking about, actually, I think it's in here. Psychoeducation is, let's talk about the parasympathetic nervous system and fight, fight, or freeze and trauma and how your body reacts. That's psychoeducation. That's not telling a client what to do. Psychoeducation could be, I saw it in here. Psychoeducation could be education on a diagnosis, like depression, and how depression is a chemical imbalance sometimes. But because I don't think you've taken a diagnosis class yet, let's actually stay away from psychoeducation for this role play, because I want to make sure that you really do know what you're talking about when you provide psychoeducation, but that would be appropriate to do in an advanced skill. It's here somewhere. I don't know where I saw it, but it gives examples of psychoeducation. Anyways, and then the very, very, very end is you want to ask the client for feedback, and the client gives you feedback, and that is your role play. And then you're going to be doing your case conceptualization on Helen through CBT. I'm going to try to set up a live class for tomorrow if you guys have any other questions, but you are doing such a good job. I'm proud of you, future therapist. As always, I am here for questions. All right. Take care.